Groupie moment.
Hello and welcome to episode 9 of the Kaiju Groupie Podcast. I am your host Michael, and for this episode I had the privilege of sitting down with the always wonderful Lisa Naffziger to discuss her background as a professional artist and storyteller, what current projects she's working on, her perspective from being a prominent female voice within the fandom, and all points in between. It was a fantastic conversation and I cannot wait for you guys to hear it. But before we move into that conversation, I do have some brand new feedback I want to read out that came via another Apple Podcast review. This review comes from friend of the podcast, Elijah. The title of the review is A Bridge Across Land and Sea, and the review reads like this. The Kaiju Groupie Podcast is something special to behold. During a time like this in the kaiju community, it's good to see some people using it to bring us together instead of apart. The best part about that is Michael has used his platform to do good and not push any agendas except for unity and community. Truly something special. Speaking not only as a guest on the cast, but as a constant listener. This podcast is easily one of my favorites, and I hope for many more episodes in the future. 5 stars. Well, thank you so much for that feedback, Elijah. It's always a pleasure hearing from you. And you, audio listener, if you also want to help out the podcast, just like Elijah, you can send us feedback via an Apple Podcast review. And what that's going to do is that's going to help put this show in front of other kaiju and tokusatsu fans just like you. You can also leave your feedback at kaijugroupiepod@gmail.com. And I promise if you do either one of those, I will read your feedback on a future episode. So without further ado, let's move into the conversation with Lisa Naffziger. Lisa, thank you so much for joining me for this episode of my podcast. How are you doing this evening?
Good. Thanks for having me. I'm excited that we connected in another podcast and I get to be a guest on yours this time too. So yay, new friends.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Like you and I were just talking just now, and this is just a relaxed conversation. Like I said, this is an opportunity for you and I to get to know each other and hopefully, talk about something that the listeners will find interesting. And I'm sure we will because, you are into a lot of stuff. So
it's a good way to put it.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. But it's all good stuff. Like I've been an admirer of yours for a while now. You've been sort of a known entity within this fandom for a little bit. I first got to know you when our friend David had you on his podcast for Building a Bridge, and that's when I found out about you, and I've been following your work ever since, and I've really enjoyed the stuff that you've put out.
Oh, thank you. I've always wondered how people end up finding my stuff, like where the roots of it are. Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's I'm just thrilled that there was another female comic book artist in this fandom that does great art. So yeah, that's when you put out that episode with David, I was super intrigued by your story and everything that you have going on. So, speaking of that, for anyone who may not know, all 3 people who may not know who you are, Lisa, let us give us a little insight on who is Lisa Naffziger, and throw in a little bit about the work you do on top of it.
Yeah, so I'm Lisa. I think a lot of people probably know me online from drawing the really neon kaiju portraits, and then maybe my participation in Kaiju, another drawing challenge over the summer. So yeah, like I said, I'm interested to see where people find me from the start, but I can see which posts get a lot of traction, and it's usually when I draw, some kind of neon portrait. Or maybe most recently, I drew Ella King with a gun. So not to trademark that yet, but that was me.
Yeah, because I saw that a few weeks. I don't know how long that's been a thing. I think it's been 3 or 4 weeks now at this point. And yeah, that one, it's weird how it's weird the kind of stuff that us and the giant monster fandom latch onto, right?
Right. The things that catch on.
Yeah, exactly. But it's been super fun. It's been super fun watching you, and it's been fun watching you grow over the last, like I was just saying, I discovered you through David's podcast. That was 9 months ago. And it's been really great seeing how you as a person and as a voice in this community has evolved in such a short amount of time.
There's definitely like this steep, like if not that we're supposed to look at the charts or anything of
Sure.
like online feedback, but when I do check up on that stuff, it's funny to see like there'll be this big upswing when I post something, or like I try to find out what that correlates to. So the Ella King thing was a hit. But before that, I think I was even just surprised to find that there was a community. I mean, I've always liked monsters and dragons and dinosaurs and things like that. But to find out that there were still people like actively enjoying the Godzilla fandom, that was pretty cool to stumble across a couple years ago.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, what got you into all this anyway? Like what got you hooked is what I'm probably trying to drive at.
Right. I think I've said it before that there seems to be some kind of gateway drug for people. Either it's going to be like they get really into animals or specifically dinosaurs. So I'm one of the dinosaur kids. Like I really fixated on that when I was a little kid. I loved the toys and learning their names. I watched every like special that was on TV. Walking with Dinosaurs. I had my grandma record that on a VHS tape so that way I could watch it over and over again. So the interest has always been there for that sort of thing. And I'd watched a couple Godzilla movies with my dad growing up. I talked to him about it recently because I was thanking him like, oh, you got me into all this stuff, so thank you for leading the way. And he's just like, oh, I just found some weird bargain bin movies. Like I was surprised he didn't have like this nostalgic attachment to it like I thought he did. But he was just like, oh, it was fun to watch together. But I guess he's not really a Godzilla fan after all.
It's interesting. It's interesting how our parents do that for us, right? Because growing up, I was also like one of those kids that was big into dinosaurs. It was in the 90s. I'm a 90s kid, so it was dinosaurs, Jurassic Park, Power Rangers, etc., etc. That's what I was into, and then I discovered Godzilla, and I discovered Godzilla through just literally my parents saw this marathon on television and decided to record this for me. And then I'm glad you said gateway drug, because I have literally said before, Godzilla is my gateway drug into everything else that, this fandom has to offer, the good and the bad.
And we were lucky enough to get in the late 90s, the Godzilla movie in the United States. So that was another thing.
Wait, what movie was this? Remind me. I don't know what you're talking about.
Oh, have we blocked it from our memory? Was Matthew Broderick in it? I don't remember.
I remember there being something about fish and worms and fish and worms and a pregnancy test. That's all I remember.
Oh my gosh. The cartoon was fantastic. I feel like that was something I remember way more than the movie. I love that show.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I love the cartoon. Like I remember the first time I discovered that cartoon was on television, like in the good old days of TV Guide. It was on the cover of TV Guide, and I thought, well, holy crap, there's more Godzilla coming in the form of a cartoon, which is great because, I'm one of those people that enjoys the cartoon more so than the movie. Although I do respect the movie, it's not great, but I know there are people out there that love it, and I can watch it. Not necessarily as a Godzilla movie, but maybe as just a giant monster movie.
And I don't know about you, but I think because the movie happened so like early into my childhood, I didn't really have like a pre-existing idea of Godzilla to really get hung up on. Like I'd seen movies before that for sure, but I don't think I was really stuck on it enough to be like, this isn't the Godzilla that I know. And then, later on in life too, I was able to feel like, oh, these are separate and it doesn't matter. One of them looks like a velociraptor and that was pretty cool, but it's just different. Right. So yeah, I'm glad that didn't like cause some kind of friction or frustration. There's some things that I feel like it'd be good for people out there in different nerd communities to go back to, is just being a kid and having fun with things and liking it for the sake of it being cool and not having this whole comparison game. Just enjoying it for what it is.
Sure.
A simpler
for
time.
Sure. Because I think that, as 30 something adults, we can go back, we can get so wrapped up in this stuff. Growing up, I didn't have the opportunity to speak with other giant monster nerds like yourself and like some other people that I've gotten to know in this year alone, because I've really, I started getting really deep into the fandom maybe a little over a year ago. Some days I regret it, but
you came in at a weird time.
I've always been a Godzilla fan, but I never, they were always my thing. I was talking with Danny. I was talking with Danny a few episodes ago, and they were always just my thing, right? They were just my dirty little secret that I kept to myself. But then I discovered other giant monster nerds recently, and I mean, it's been fun. It's been really good to communicate with other people, because like I said, we didn't have that growing up. And
right. I don't know if that's necessarily something that really bothered me either. I hear a lot of people talk about it being a really lonely fandom growing up, and now we're connecting with people online, it wasn't readily available. And I guess that's the case for me, but I don't think that I missed out. I was just okay with liking what I liked. Or if maybe there was a fandom that I was oh, I need that connection component. Pokemon was a huge thing too, and Digimon. So it's all of these cool creatures. I have friends at school that I could nerd out with as a kid and collect things and have something that's actively happening. So other than that, I was content just to have my old Godzilla toys and watch whatever movies and just enjoy it by myself. So I think it's kind of weird that I didn't really long for a community or anything, but maybe it is because I got that through Pokemon and Digimon.
Yeah, for sure. I do remember growing up with, I was never a huge Pokemon or Digimon fan. I think that fad or that part of the fandom kind of passed me by a little bit. Maybe it was because it came out at a time when I was a little bit older, and it wasn't cool to be a giant monster nerd in late middle school or early high school, right?
Oh, right.
I've joked with other people before, liking Godzilla and Tokusatsu didn't get you a whole lot of dates in high school. So I kind of suppressed.
Yeah. It's not always the good kind of clout, I guess. I have this distinct memory as a kid. A friend called me up on the house phone. So we're setting the scene. Mm-hmm. This is in the 90s,
Sure.
She was like, "Oh, hey, what are you doing later today? Why don't you come over and go swimming?" And I'm looking at my binder of Pokemon cards, and I'm watching Saturday morning cartoons, and I'm just wow, I was kind of doing this and enjoying my introvert time. I was oh, I'm doing Pokemon card sorting right now. Maybe we can do it tomorrow. And she laughed at me on the phone and was just "Oh, you still collect Pokemon cards?" For the first time, I felt embarrassed about it. It was something new feeling. I'm wait, is this too much? Am I supposed to be past this by now? So then I, got nervous, and I said, "Oh, well, it's actually my little sister's collection. So yeah, I'll be right over." And I look at that now and I feel kind of sad, because I'm no, I should have just owned what I like. I was still a fourth grader, and to know that I felt embarrassed even then, it's come on, kids be kids.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a weird circle, right? Because you're young and you get really excited about that stuff, and it's cool to you for a while, and then you get a little older and things change. The culture changes a little bit. Your circle of friends change, and then it becomes uncool. And then you reach a certain point in your life and in your adulthood when you just say, you know what, screw it. I like what I like, and no one can tell me any different. And I think that's where a lot of folks are right now, because it's been amazing to me about how many people I've met within this fandom who just own who they are. It's been wonderful, right? Mm-hmm. It's been such a wonderful experience.
It's good. I'm glad that it's still an active thing. I think I want to hear about how you got plugged in with everything, like just recently. But I know for me, I think I said a little bit about it on when we did our Gamma Roundtable on Monsters and Men, plug for another podcast. But
we don't plug them on this show.
Okay. Redacted. Take that part. I think I was looking for something to casually watch and listen to while I was working on some comic stuff, and they had Mystery Science Theater on Netflix, and I thought, oh, there's like this weird thumbnail with it was Gamera versus Giron, so I see the big knife head thing. I'm like, that looks pretty goofy. Let me turn it on. And I'd never seen anything to do with Gamera just until, like 6 years ago. So I started looking up the monsters, watching the other movies, and then just drawing pictures for fun, not thinking that people would engage with it. But I just, once again, I like what I like, and I want to draw some fun monsters. Right. And there was this huge upswing of people engaging with my work on Tumblr. And I was like, who likes this stuff still? Who are all you people? So it was wonderful. And then I found out people would do like drawing challenges like Kai July. So they're like, oh, we're going to draw a different monster for every day of July. And I'm like, are there that many? So I had to do some research, and get on Wikizilla and find out a bunch of other stuff. So it just kind of snowballed from that. And I draw something, people are like, yeah, do this one next. And I'm like, I didn't even know that one existed. Which I'm fortunate that people were never making me feel like, oh, you don't know about Ultraman, or you don't know this episode of whatever this is actually from. Like, people were always so excited to tell me more about their favorite monster. And it kind of reminded me of the Pokemon days. So, even if it's like, I haven't caught up yet with like all the new cards from the next wave of Pokemon, it's like people are so excited to tell you about the new ones they found. And it was the same kind of thing with giant monsters. So, yeah. It was very educational.
Right. How I got plugged in, since you brought it up earlier, I don't even remember the moment I got plugged in. I think it was when my interest peaked back up in 2014 with the release of the very first Legendary film. Right. Mm-hmm. So that's when my interest peaked, and I kind of piddled around for a few years after that. And then I started seeing rumblings about the sequel. This was after Kong Skull Island, which, Lisa and I went and watched, Kong Skull Island. We both enjoyed it. And she's not even my wife, Lisa, is not even a big, giant monster nerd. She's not into this at all. Like, I'm literally by myself as far as us two go. Like, she has no interest whatsoever, but it's cool. That's just how she is. So, and she supports my interests. So that's really, I guess that's all that matters. Right. So
what did she think of the movie? Did she like it?
She did. Yeah. She liked it. She liked 2014. She thought it was kind of sad, in parts. She really liked Kong Skull Island, but I started getting plugged in more to the fandom stuff when I started seeing leaks and spoilers and things for King of the Monsters. And I started researching it more. And so I went on this journey to find all the movies, right, that I didn't own at the time. And so I finally, like, after weeks and weeks of searching, I finally got my hands on physical copies of all the films. And then 2 months later, Criterion releases the set, and I was pretty bitter about that. But anyway,
man, really, that was the timing for you? That sucks.
That was, yeah. That really sucked. Like, egg on my face. But I started digging. Like, at first I started digging into the Facebook groups, which, if you've never been a part of any of the Godzilla Facebook groups, that tends to be an animal unto itself.
There's some mixed results there.
Yeah, definitely. I got plugged into a couple of the bigger ones, and I quickly found out that maybe these big groups of like 100,000 people or 30,000 people or plus, all screaming about the same thing, probably was not for me. So I started joining some of these smaller, more nuanced groups where I could talk more one-on-one with other fans. And that's sort of how I got started. And then fast forward to January of 2019. No, fast forward to late 2019. I'm just trying to recall everything. I started listening to podcasts, right? I started discovering all these podcasts about Godzilla and tokusatsu and giant monster movies and stuff like that. And so I think one of the very first ones I started listening to may have been David's show, but it also could have been Kaiju Weekly with Travis, which later that was my very first attempt at being a podcaster. And I owe sort of that part of this fandom to Travis, because he was kind enough to invite me on as a guest.
That's awesome.
Because his show was pretty new as well. So him and Steven, his former co-host, they were looking for guests. And so the January of, I want to say January of 2020 was my first episode. My first episode was Frankenstein Conquers the World with Travis. And believe me, I thought it was just going to be just get on there and chit chat for a little while. And I go back and listen to that episode every now and then. I'm like, man, you didn't have a clue what you were doing, Mike. Come on.
Some people are so thorough. I'm like, how do you know every actor's name and all these details about the year that it came out? Like, I'm just like, I like the part when this thing happened.
That's why I'm so impressed with what Henry does, because he knows so much.
I know.
As far as like the actors' names and stuff like that. So I'm like, Henry's show was one of the first podcasts I started digging into as well. So after I kind of got involved with the podcasting side of it, I started digging around on Twitter and met a lot of great people like, David, Alex, Travis, and some others. And later on, I met some other fantastic people like you, Henry. And, I've met a lot of my core friend group through the giant monster community. And that's pretty much how I got plugged in. And here I sit talking to you on my very own podcast. So yeah.
Yeah, I'm so glad that we connected. I'm glad for the most part, people are really like, I don't know, once again, it reminds me of like the best parts of being a kid. You see somebody else playing with a plastic dinosaur toy and you're like, you like them too? And they're like, yeah, come sit with me.
Exactly.
Exactly. Good parts of it feel like that. I mean, unfortunately, not every case is like that, but there's been a good core community of people who've made me feel really welcome. And I get the question a lot too, being a female creator. People are like, what's it like for you? Do you feel unwelcome? Do people treat you any differently? Like, what's your experience like? And I mean, it's not an interesting answer, but I think it's a comforting one to know that my experience doesn't feel affected by that really at all. Other than people maybe are excited to have me on for the Mothra episode because she's I'm kidding. Shout out to Gargantua Cast. No, that was fun. No, like people treat me like I'm supposed to be there, and I want to do that for the same for other people. So I'm glad that hasn't affected my experience at all. I'm glad that people, just like that I draw stuff and then shout at me to do more, and then I do more. So that's been good.
Yeah. I will say that the giant monster, the community that we have tried to build so far, for the most part, are some of the sweetest people that I have ever met. Like, they're just like, it's really interesting to find people that are just so welcoming and so friendly, and just all they want to do is just share their passion with other folks. Because I think, and this is something I think Henry and I recently talked to each other about, was, none of us really, a lot of us come from a place of being that shy kid in the corner playing with his toys or reading a book. Right. And a lot of us are just so excited to find other like-minded people like ourselves. The danger, the downside to that is, unfortunately, there are some cases where this fandom is their entire identity. And then it becomes dangerous a little bit, because you get deep into it, right? Like if something happens to upset you, then it's like an end of the world kind of deal.
Yeah,
but,
right.
I don't, yeah, I don't. I'm trying not to go into that area of it because I want to keep this conversation as positive as I humanly possibly can. So just now you said that you draw stuff. I think that's pretty much what we all know you for. Like your artwork is fantastic.
Thank you.
So you are a comic book artist by trade, correct?
Yes. I went to Savannah College of Art and Design and got to study comic books for 4 years. So it's so cool that there's schools out there that let you have like that much of a specialty major. I do have to admit that it wasn't my plan from the very beginning. I've always liked animation, and I thought that was going to be my route initially. But I think when I found out the direction animation was going at the time seemed to be way more like technical. I mean, I don't mind being on the computer. I do most of my work that way, but to think that it could be like I'm tweaking models in a modeling program for most of my time instead of drawing or like being part of the storytelling portion of it, I think I found out that was the part that I liked about that the most. So when I was about to declare a major, I felt really undecided until somebody's like, well, why don't you check comics out? Like, even if it's not something you feel really well versed in, it sounds like it's the part of the process that you like, so you could benefit from that. Yeah. And I'm sure glad that I did, because I totally fell in love with the medium. I came into it, having been, we talk about gateway drugs, manga. I was a manga kid. We all were, right? Like sitting in the back of Barnes and Noble trying to read an entire book before mom comes back from shopping. Like, we've all been there. So,
or you're just this kid with no money, and that's the only way you can read your favorite comics.
I know, because there's so much stuff too, and you're like, if I can skip this one, I can afford the next one, like, because you can shell out like $10 at a time to buy a volume of Inuyasha, and I'm glancing at my shelf and seeing I only have 9 of them. So I envy anybody who's ever able to own the entirety of One Piece. It's still going, but I'm like. So comics was not my original route, but I really liked it. It was a great time at SCAD. I graduated in 2014, and I've been doing stuff ever since. So I started out teaming up with different writers, and then I do the illustrations for their books. So I've done graphic novels that way, and then children's books too can be a little less big of a project. I appreciate that those get done a lot sooner than like 100 or 200 page comics, but storytelling art is what I specialize in, and I'm glad that I've been able to put out a lot of stuff.
Yeah. There's something really honest, and I think that what draws a lot of folks to the comic book world is there's something very, I'm trying to think of the right word to use here, but like the only one that's coming to mind is tangible. Like there's something very hands-on and tangible to comic book art. Like there's fantastic artists. There's fantastic digital artists out there like Dope Pope and some others that can work the 3D modeling programs and make beautiful, beautiful stuff. But there's something so honest and so tangible and beautiful about comic book art is because it is very hands-on. And I'm assuming, and I'm going to be safe to assume that that's one of the key things that drew you to that medium.
Absolutely. And I also have to admit that I like that it's something you can, if you want to, do entirely by yourself. I'm not always so great with the group work dynamic just because I get frustrated and I think, well, I'll just do it all myself. So I've done a lot of stuff all by myself, and that's why it takes twice as long. But you feel like you have the most amount of like resources at your fingertips, because I think so many of us, we love movies and we think like of how cool it would be to direct and create a feature film. So this is like the next best thing that I can do, and I can rely on myself to put it out there, even if it takes a long time. Like it's still not nearly as involved as making a movie. So being able to tell a story start to finish all by yourself in a visual way, I think is something that's really special and unique to the medium. And then also because I don't like to do group work. So
you're also independently published, correct?
Yes. Both ways. I have some that I've published by myself. Oh, my dog just groaned at me. I think I'm being too loud.
It's okay. My cats give me looks all the time too.
It's funny. I have books, or I had a webcomic that I started out with after I was finished with college that I've self-published by myself, but I also have a traditionally published graphic novel that came out last year through Iron Circus Comics. So that's something I'm really excited about too, to have like actually a traditionally published book that's out there in the world. Like, people send me pictures of it when they see it in the library or at a bookstore. I think it was because it was alphabetical, but somebody did show me a picture in a bookstore in New York that my book was right next to Watchmen, because I think Naffziger and then Alan Moore, those two books lined up. So I was like, oh man, so close. But
right.
yeah, it's a young adult graphic novel. It's like a dad and daughter crime story called Minus. So like attraction or a minus sign, but MINUS. I know it doesn't come out as well as when I say it, but yeah, I put that together. I'm the author, the illustrator. I did all the lettering and colors for it too. So I feel like that's why it took so long, but it's out there in the world and it's super cool to see.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. But you also publish a webcomic that has become really popular as well, too.
I'm really glad that it's taken off. Something that is different about webcomics than traditional publishing is, I mean, as you're working on it, you can share pages of a webcomic week by week and get feedback from people. So sometimes that's that like extra dose of encouragement for me that people are liking what's happening so far and they have some quick input or feedback for me, the direction that it's going. So I really like that engagement, and I think it helps boost me in the right direction to want to continue. Whereas if you do a graphic novel the classic way, a lot of times you have to do it in solitude with no feedback other than from your publisher or your editor. And then at the end of it all, you don't know how people are going to like respond to it. So there are pros and cons to each, but I am excited to be working on a webcomic again because I get to talk to all of you.
Right, for sure. And it's a really wonderful webcomic, right? Because I just started reading it. I'm about 3 or 4 pages into Attack of the Audit.
Okay.
And yeah, I'm about 3 or 4 pages in, and I'm enjoying myself. I'm enjoying myself very much. It's a very well illustrated. There we go, and well written comic. So. Speaking specifically about Taking Back Toku, which is the title of the webcomic, where did that idea start with you?
I'm so interested in behind the scenes stuff with practical effects, and I know a lot of that. We get cool screenshots and snippets of movie footage that's happening from people who still use practical effects, but I think we've all checked out a book from the library, that like does behind the scenes stuff for Godzilla, or I watch all the DVD extras on things, and it's just like such a fascinating thing that I thought it'd be cool if like there was somebody trying to kind of crusade for the cause to use practical effects still in like an age that's shifting more towards digital effects, and then how that could go, but also spliced in with like there being real monsters later on.
Right.
So trying to juggle this like slice of life kind of story that I like to tell, but also have it be like a monster adventure story. Yeah, I like both of those things, so I wanted to figure out a good way to do them both. And also it seemed like it was more pressing or relevant to do with all the discussions that I hear surrounding, the human characters are so uninteresting in all these monster movies. Because it seems like, I don't know, a lot of them you could argue are made, like the main part of it's going to be the cool monster action scenes, and then we threw in some extra stuff to broaden it out. But for like a different way of doing it, I thought like, we could have like a traditional story backdrop and then also have these other elements incorporated in it. So I hope that one doesn't feel like an afterthought.
You're doing all the writing for this as well too.
Yeah, this is another one. It's all my own thing. I hope that I have some more time to devote to it in the near future. I just finished up a big comic contract for the summer, so can pick it back up again, and I've still been able to update. I had enough of a buffer, which I was glad that I didn't have to like take a break from that, but I think maybe I can draw it a little bit more quickly this time around.
So I'm going to assume that COVID has actually worked in your favor this
It
time
has,
around then.
yeah. I feel like I'm one of the few people to say that. I was like, oh, this is such a great year to stay inside and draw.
Right, right.
It
Yeah,
like
it's
flattened out all of my social obligations, or like there are even things that are still I'm involved with, but you can live stream church on the weekends. You can do a Zoom call to like chat with somebody real quick.
yeah, yeah, for
I've been
sure.
able to draw in the background the whole time. I'm like, yes, I'm listening, Mom, and I'm still like scribbling on my screen. So it hasn't been all that bad for me. I mean, I miss going out and doing stuff and seeing people. I was sad that a lot of my actually all of them, all the comic events that I do this year were canceled. So that was a bummer because I do like to see everybody.
Right. Yeah. Like if you're in a creative field like this, it's, in the age of COVID, it's really good to be in that field. It's just unfortunate that it's sort of a lonely place to be, especially if you're self-employed like you and I are.
Mm-hmm.
I work from home as well. And so I have to force myself to go outside.
It's tough.
And yeah, it is tough. And like before it's interesting because before COVID, I was I was a little bit of an introvert not introvert's not the right word to use. I was a little bit of a homebody anyway. Like I'm comfortable here. Like I just like to be I like to be in my workspace, with my music and just everything, everything in its place, and just, it's my happy place. Right. And when COVID hit, and I was forced to stay here, it's like my brain said, well, no, I don't want to do this anymore. So maybe being a homebody is not the best thing for me.
It shifts your perspective, and it probably wouldn't have been any different for you, right? Like if you had carried on the year without thinking too much about it, maybe not much would have changed, but it's like that whole denial of like, no, now I realize like I can't go out and do stuff. Now I'm mad.
Right. Right, exactly. It's before it was, I don't want to go out and do stuff because I had an option to or not. But now it's like, I can't do it. And now it's a problem.
Right. I miss having the opportunity to say no instead of it being an automatic no. Like,
Exactly. And, my wife and I have been my wife and I have not been pretty fortunate. We've been very fortunate because, she works outside of the home. She works at one of the major hospitals here in town, in the town where we live. And I work from home. So my job has not really changed a whole lot. I am an art director for an agency out of St. Louis. And, I'm able to work with a variety of projects throughout the week. And, my routine didn't really change much come January, February, when things started getting really bad. Same with Lisa. She still had to work outside the home. She had to go to the hospital every day. So, we've been pretty blessed. And like you said, church is streamed now, which I miss. Like I miss going back to church, like to see everybody and like, actually fellowship with everybody, because I think that's an important thing to do. But it's also really nice to sit in your pajamas and you're drinking coffee on a Sunday. And you're just enjoying the service or whatever, and you don't have to worry about, smiling at people you don't necessarily want to smile at, or lingering too long in the lobby and chit chatting making small talk with people.
Yep.
It's that kind of stuff,
I feel
right?
you.
And that sounds really trivial.
No, I know what you mean.
No, yeah, for sure. But I want to get back to Taking Back Toku just for a second, because like you mentioned the human characters, and I was really curious by reading through some of these pages here. What were any of these characters inspired by actual real people within your life?
I always want to say no and like make people admire how creative I am, but I think everybody does stuff that's like based on their own experiences, or like there's a little dose of them in every character that they write. So in some ways I'm just like, well, no, Akio's not me. She has purple hair, but then I dyed my hair purple earlier this summer. So
Right.
I think it's important to me to try to write things or think of them from a different perspective, so that it's not just like a self-insert or like only viewed through my own lens. I try to have characters that have like frustrations that are different than mine, but I do probably tie it back to, maybe if it doesn't go back to one person in particular per character. Like it's not an even match. It might be like experiences that I've recognized from other people and things that they're going through. I thought it would be a unique experience too, to like share the perspective of Akio, my main character. She's a single parent living with her friend as a roommate. And I was thinking about how cool the family dynamic could be with all of them working together, and not just like a traditional, like, oh, the dad, he died, or maybe we won't even talk about his dad. Like something, I don't know, non-traditional family setups, trying to, I don't know, not just break things up for the sake of breaking them up, but I'm thinking about like the unique conflicts that could be there, like especially because her studio is in a bad financial situation, thinking about how that could really affect her poorly if she's already like in a cramped apartment in LA, barely making ends meet. I think there's a little more urgency there if they're in a less comfortable situation.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's interesting. And I like that. I like that you're writing stories about, you're trying to write stories anyway, like from different perspectives and unique perspectives, because not everyone's life story is the same. I'm curious, how much research goes into how much research do you personally put into researching these characters before you start really diving in to develop them?
I admire all the people who do all this like personality sheets for their OCs, and then they write all these details like likes and dislikes and backstory, like a D&D sheet almost, and then they'll do like these microcosms of the universe and all the flora and fauna to worlds like that, like
we call them at work, through my job we call them user personas.
Yeah, I've heard that term before, like using it as kind of like a blocking of these different characters. All of that to say, I don't do that. Those were the people that I watch, and I'm like, wow, I think that's something I should pick up sometime and think this more through. But I think I can't get past the excitement of getting started and doing it. So I tend to write myself in a corner, but I have a loose idea of things, and then I just get to drawing and thumbnailing everything out and sketching out the story. Especially as a webcomic too, I try to like have the first portions of the story totally done, and then I can post them, and then I'll move on, which ends up getting complicated later if I realize, oh, I'm contradicting myself, or I didn't think this far ahead. Like there'll be a part where I script everything out, then I take a couple weeks and I'm drawing to catch up. And then I get to that point where I'm like, oh, I'm at the end of my notes. I don't know what happens next. So I think that's something that I want to change the way I do it, because I get myself into trouble all the time with that. But yeah, I don't know. I really like to draw, I like to work and produce things. I like to be this, I know people don't hear it a lot, but I do like to be the content farm. I can draw a funny dinosaur and somebody's like, haha, I like this. And then I'm like, good, this is my dose of serotonin for the day. Like, so I might do better with some more patience and some love and care to thinking about the way things go. But I think I'm always just like too excited not to get started. Like I don't want to wait. That's why it's so interesting to listen to Henry talk about everything that he's writing out for Apex. Like I listened to him go through, it was like that whole catalog of all the different monsters that he has laid out, and he has all these intricacies, and I'm like, wow, you took the time to figure all this out. And I'm just like, I don't know, this girl has purple hair, let me draw her. Like, so overall I have like a skeleton of the story. But I think, yeah, there are some folks that I might be talking to for some story writing suggestions.
Do you get Jacob? Is that your husband's name? Am I correct? Okay. Do you get him involved a lot when you're scripting these things out, or do you bounce a lot of ideas off of him as you're working through a character or working through a story arc?
If he's able to follow along with whatever I'm saying, then yeah, it's good to like kind of bounce some ideas off of him and get some instant feedback. Sometimes though, because we're so close and we're spouses, I'm just like, I don't know if I can take what you're going to say about this. If you think it's dumb, like I'll be worried that he'll say something like, oh, why don't you try something different? And I'll like get sad and think like this is a personal attack. So
Right.
No, I've got some people like in writing communities too that I'm able to bounce some ideas off of, but I should probably do it more. I think I tend to just work in isolation, and then at the end of it I'm like, oh, maybe some peer review would have helped because some of this isn't making sense.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I'm curious. I'm sitting here, like I'm curious. I'm listening to you talk about all this, and I'm wondering. And if you don't mind me asking, what's some things? What is one major thing, or a few things that you've learned about yourself while developing these comics and developing your artwork?
Definitely, there's been more of a like a shaping of how I do things. So like streamlining my workflow and I don't know, the really unemotional part of it where it's like, how efficient can I be? How many things can I get done? How many things do I have to do before I get burnt out and really overwhelmed? Those are definitely some things that pop up a lot, but I think I've been able to discover like what parts of it I like best and what are things that don't come as naturally to me, or I'll even find that I like to go through things and figure it out and be really clumsy with it in order to be able to share what I've learned with other people. Like I have suggestions for, well, now I feel like it's all an efficiency thing. Like this is a better way to set up your workflow, and this is how many pages you could schedule out for something. But yeah, I really like to work, I guess is what I figured out. I love to to make stuff all the time. It's super fun. And I don't find that I get too much to a point where I get really burnt out, which is good because I know that can be a huge problem when it happens to people. But I'll get to points where some of it feels so mechanical. Like I'll be drawing day in, day out, but still not feel like I've done anything really creative, if that makes sense. Maybe you can relate to it like with what you do for work. Like it's still a creative thing, but some of it gets so like specific and technical that it loses like the looseness and the fun creative part of it, and it does feel like work.
It loses the it loses sort of its spirit and its personality a little bit.
That's it. Yeah.
It becomes I don't know. I'll be working on like the majority of my day consists of like designing and building websites, specifically like UX UI stuff. So there's a very technical element to that. Like you have to know a little bit of math if you're going to work with that type of medium's not the right word to use, but if you're gonna work in sort of that area of design, there is some math and some technical stuff involved, and I hate that kind of stuff, honestly. I do. I was sitting in a meeting the other day, and we were going through our list of things that need to happen that week, and my creative director Kirk, he looks at me and says, Mike, we need to pump out a few of these brand guides for client X, Y, and Z this week. Do you want to take those? And I just said, no, I don't.
At least you were honest.
I don't want to take them because I hate doing brand guides. I hate doing stuff like that because it's creative to a point, but it's not the same as sitting down and having an open canvas or an open artboard, and you get to work through that. You get to work through all that stuff the way you think it should be worked through. Like, doing more mechanical, what I would call busy work, just bugs me to no end. And, shoot, there was one. You said something about burnout, and like burnout is a real thing. And I admire people like you that can just sit down and just power through something and not be fazed by it. Right. Without showing any because I don't see, like, I've sort of watched you evolve online and just through your art and your interactions in the community. I've just seen you evolve as a person throughout knowing you and knowing of you. I don't see you burning out like at all. Like I don't see like any of that stress. Like you don't project any of that stress that maybe you're probably feeling that.
Yeah. The illusion has been cast then successfully. But I will say, I think this could probably answer what you were asking with this last question too. I think I've found this good like ebb and flow balance of like anticipating when I'll feel really creative and when I'll feel the lower point of that. And I can try to balance the workload around that, if that makes sense.
Sure.
Like I wish we could all have days where we felt like enormously creative and coming up with so many good ideas. And I know exactly where I'm going to go with this. And, you know, when those days happen, they're great. And I feel like we should take advantage of them. I find that they can be fewer far between. So I'll take advantage of those days, write everything down that I can think of as it's coming to me. But I do notice the rest of it is that like, gosh, I feel this art block or writer's block. But the thing that's good about comics or projects that are so long form is there are way more days where it's not dependent on you having an idea. It's you just doing the grunt work. So it's like, I only need like this glimmer of the idea to like figure out what I'm doing next. And then the rest of it, I can just like, it's still brain work, but you know, you can kind of tune out for a little bit, just draw and watch a movie in the background, talk to a friend. I try to balance that out a little bit so I don't get to the point where I'm paralyzed and I think like, I don't know what to do. I don't know what to draw. Cause I like try to have that planned out on a more creative day, or even just the way social media can connect you with people and taking suggestions. Like I love when I open up a prompt on Twitter or Instagram. I'm just like, hey, I want to draw a cool monster. What's your favorite one from Ultraman? And then everybody will send me a ton of suggestions. I'm like, okay, now I know what to do every day. Like it takes away a lot of that pressure.
Yeah, for sure. I know this probably doesn't get talked a lot. Or it doesn't get talked about enough or even a lot really in the creative fields. But do you ever feel imposter syndrome for what you do, Lisa?
Yes.
Like, do you ever have that feeling?
All the time.
Yeah. So the reason I bring that up is because I have several friends who are in the creative fields and they're new, like they've not been doing this very long at all. And one of them specifically was telling me the other day, it's like, I just feel like a huge imposter. Like, I just feel like I'm just kind of, playing around in Photoshop and, trying to pass myself off as a real artist or a real designer. Do you have any advice for those folks?
Yeah, I think what I've learned, and I'm still in the thick of it to some extent, some of it just ends up being the realization that there won't be like this satisfying moment or this day when like the fairy will descend and be like, yes, Lisa, today is happening. Today you are a real artist. And I'll be like, oh, finally, like we're never going to get that chance. So I think it's just good to make the most of what you can do right now. And remember that the main qualifiers are not like the level of skill you have or based on how you compare yourself to somebody else. Like, should you evaluate yourself that way? I don't think that ends up being really productive. Somebody had pointed out to me, like, the qualifying terms are, okay, can you call yourself an artist? And then you think, well, no, I'm not good enough, or I don't do this often enough. But somebody's like, but are you doing it at some points? And you're like, yeah, I draw. I do funny monster drawings on the internet. Does that count? And the answer is yes. Like, if you're doing something, then that's really all it takes. I know, especially, I feel there's this pressure for people who have like degrees in different creative fields and feel like the imposter syndrome in that regard. Like, well, I have a whole degree in music or comics or whatever in film that you decided to go forward with. And you think like, oh, I'm not a real director. I'm not a real artist. I'm not a real musician. But it's like, well, if you're doing it every day or you're doing it at all, I think you qualify. Like, there shouldn't be this disqualification just because you think you're not at the level that you want to be at. Like, if you're actively doing it, that's really all you need. And that's been such a comfort to me, because I think like, oh, well, I'll finally be happy when I have a book. And then it's like, well, I have a book. So then the line actually moved. It's like, well, when I have like a book that's a bestseller, when I'm the next this or that, or when I get an Eisner Award, it's just like the bar is always going to be moving. So I think we just have to decide to be happy now. I feel like that's something my mom would say, but no, it's really true.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, I like what you said there about the bar constantly moving. Like there's like, you know, as I was coming up sort of through my career, like my early days as a quote unquote designer, when I was feeling that imposter syndrome. And I think that's something that we all suffer with. If we're in any creative field whatsoever, I think you're going to experience some degree of imposter syndrome. And the one thing that I've had to remember is I just log in every day. I do the best possible work that I can, and hope that it's going to turn out okay. I mean, that's really all you can do, is just do the best work that you possibly can.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well said. Because I think we get really sad when we look at other people and we think like what they have is what it's going to take for me to actually be happy. But then it's surprising because I think sometimes like I didn't expect to get where I am now. And I really thought it would make me happier, or it would like fix whatever frustration I had. But then it's actually better for me to see that this is like a me thing. This isn't like the universe has to line up in order for me to be happy. It's like, no, this is something that I have to be content with, which is easier said than done. And day to day it varies. I mean, I think a lot of us, we don't have a good happy medium. It's usually this balance of like, oh, I am on fire today. Everything I do is just like so great. Like nothing can stop me. And then there are other days where you can't even get out of bed. You're like, why try? What's the point? Like,
yeah, for sure.
It's comforting to know that everybody from like all levels of things feels that way, especially like all of people that I'm looking up to who will share the same kind of stuff and frustrations that they go to. And I'm like, oh, so this is something that is more common. It makes me feel a little less alone. Or I'll be caught off guard sometimes when I'll get like a really nice comment, or somebody will DM me and be like, oh yeah, you really inspire me, and one day I hope I can do what you do. And I think like, oh, but I think that of somebody else. So I'm surprised that you thought that of me. So it's a good feeling. Sometimes I'm just like, you don't want this, kid. Like you don't know what you're in for, but
I mean, that's a really nice segue, because I was sitting here thinking, because I just want to say that I view you, and I know I'm not alone in this. I view you as a really prominent, very positive, just I don't know what other hyperbole to use, but like just a fantastic voice within the giant monster community specifically.
Thank you.
So I did go back and listen a little bit to your conversation with David. And I'm curious, like, how has your perspective about this fandom and just your experiences here changed since, say, I don't know, since January? Because a lot has changed since January.
It has.
Like,
this is where the positivity ends. No, I'm kidding.
No, I don't think so. I think there are some bright spots and there's some really dark spots in this community. But I'm just curious, from your perspective, being such a prominent female voice in this community, like how has your perspective changed?
Thanks for asking, because it's something I've realized like it is a development. I'm glad that it's an ongoing conversation, or at least the opportunity to like reflect on things and have important conversations. I don't like the inciting incidents that happen that make us feel like we've regressed and have to like call people out or talk about things that we thought we knew better about. But I think if there's one thing that really stands out to me, it's that even when there can be like bad things happening, or like the veil is lifted and there are some people maybe that we looked up to that turn out to be not so great, or like they disappoint us, whatever kinds of things are going on. A lot of people feel really discouraged because it's like, oh, this is somebody I looked up to, or, oh, this is poison the well and none of us have a home anymore. I like to think that it's an encouragement to like make better things or make new things that people will gravitate towards and enjoy just as much or maybe even more is my hope. I don't find that a lot of it discourages me. It actually like kind of pumps me up to be like, well, if there are people out there who are being, I don't know, like discriminatory or unkind, it's just like all the more reason for me to feel like, wow, there really is a need for, I don't know, not just like more positive things, but there are people who are hurting that I could reach out to, or I can just rub it in their face and be better. I don't know, like I do feel like there's this invitation to like, this is the environment where it's important for me to make my own things. Like, it's not necessary for me to continue what's already established. Like, there's an opening now for me to, not like it's super important to stand out, but like, I feel like people could really connect with my stuff, if that makes sense.
Yeah, for sure.
So I hope more people take encouragement from that. Because I know things like this can be really disappointing. This is super vague. But you know, anytime that there's something
no,
like
it's fine.
this.
If you don't want to be vague, you don't have to be vague. It's fine.
Yeah. I don't think that we should have this like idealistic view of people either. And sometimes that's like hard to come into as adults. Because it's like if we've had this enjoyment of Godzilla, of giant monsters, of things like that since we were a little kid, coming into this adult space, it's hard to like kind of wrestle with, oh, for the first time we can see that people think about other things and they think really horrible things about other things, you know, like commentaries that they have about worldviews don't line up with ours, or people are really unkind and uncaring, and it's really mean-spirited sometimes out there. And I just think that I don't want this to just be like, oh, Lisa always says these kumbaya kinds of things, but I don't know. It's like a good reason to have your presence if you can be like a force to kind of combat that behavior.
Yeah. Positive. I mean, I love people who are positive, but at the end of the day, we're real people and we have real opinions and we have real thoughts and feelings towards certain things. Right.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I agree with all the stuff that you're saying there. And I'm curious from your perspective, like how much, like one thing that Eric and I talked about when I talked to him was, you know, on social media, you have to have a strong opinion to cut through the noise, right? And sometimes that strong opinion can either be too strong or too opinionated. And I'm curious, how much of it is really what people think, or how much of it is an act? Like how much of it is a show is really what I'm sitting here wondering.
I don't think that we get a lot of sincere initial reactions anymore, because there is that pressure of like, I have the opportunity to like really think and edit what I'm going to say. And like the fact that I don't have to be face to face with this person when I say it, we both can like really go to town with each other. So I think we really curate a lot of what we say, not to say that that makes it entirely dishonest, because sometimes it is good to like, I'm not going to give my gut response and have it be a really heated reaction. Like I'm going to collect myself and say things how I want to be understood. But sometimes I do wonder, like, if it takes away some of those genuine feelings, like if you're taking into account the concern of like, well, if I say this, how are other people going to respond? And you're even thinking about people on both sides of the issue. You're thinking like, am I going to let people down who really, that I care about? Like, am I going to let them down too if I'm quiet about it? There's a really interesting conversation about like the complacency of people that's perceived like when they're silent on issues too, which some of that I don't think is a productive conversation, because not all of us are plugged in every second of the day. But there is something to be said, like if everybody knows that you've seen what's going on and you've chosen to turn a blind eye to it, it's like, is there some complacency there? So I'm definitely not arguing that like, Lisa, you didn't respond to that 2 hours after it happened. It was just like, oh, well, I was at work, so I didn't see it.
I mean, I have a life, so yeah. Anyway, but no, I think that I want to play devil's advocate just for a second. Like I just want to say that I think sometimes that, the lack of commenting on a certain issue is not necessarily that you want to ignore it. It's just that sometimes the conversation is so nuanced. That people don't really know what to say.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a good point.
And does it, everyone has an opinion, everyone has a thought. And sometimes it is helpful, especially when prominent voices. And I'll have to admit, I'm a little bit guilty of this myself. Like I don't chime in when I should. But like I said, there are issues well outside of my pay grade that I feel like if I jump in, I'm just going to muddy the waters even more. And I don't want to do that. Mm-hmm. I would rather let people who are more educated in those areas handle that.
Right. Or even if it's like an experience that is not one that I am ever going to have. Sometimes It's like, I think that we're really eager to help people in marginalized groups, and we want to come to their aid so quickly that we don't realize that we're actually talking over people who are going through those experiences.
Yeah. Yeah. That's probably the best. That's probably the most succinct and best response I've heard someone say.
Thanks for letting me think about that.
Yeah, for sure. That's no problem because, it's tough. So to bring it back around to a little bit of more positivity, because, we can all agree that social media is one big cluster, mm-hmm. right? So at least it has been in the last couple of days. We won't get into that, but I'll just say it has been for the last couple of days. Where are some bright spots that you see in this community from your perspective?
I think there are people who I really look forward to, like their creative endeavors and things that they're genuinely excited about. Like if maybe there's one good thing that's happened this year, it's that people have a little more time and energy to put towards some of their passion projects. So it's so mm-hmm. cool to see people come alive and be able to do that, or start new adventures, or even like find the right fit for what they're doing and use the internet as a sounding board. I think about David initially talking about the response from doing blog posts versus trying the same kinds of discussions as a podcast, and seeing that there was like such a huge difference of engagement. So it like wasn't an issue of the content, it was like how it was presented. So I think it's good for people to figure out what suits them best. So seeing people's projects come alive, trying new endeavors, that stuff makes me excited. And then, are there any movies coming out? I don't know. It's fun. It's fun to laugh with everybody about whether or not King Kong versus Godzilla, or the other way around, whether that movie's ever coming out. I like the memes of things that happen. Like, it's good to laugh.
Honestly, I just wish they would. I wish they would just release it to streaming. Like, I know that would take a huge chunk of their ticket sales, but I think that so many people are just so upset that we've not seen hardly anything, that it's making people a little bit insane, mm-hmm. and it's exhausting.
Yeah,
it's definitely exhausting.
There's like some camaraderie there that we're all frustrated about it and speculating things, but yeah, I just wish they'd make it.
And that's part of the fun too, though.
I hope that they'll continue to make things. I mean, I'm not the Hollywood budget committee or anything, but yeah, sometimes I just think there are so many examples of like cinematic universes that have worked out, or even in the past. Like, I mean, you think about Godzilla having so many different characters and components to it, like it really paved the way for this kind of shared universe thing. So you would think it'd be a natural fit to like do it all over again. So I wonder why it's not working. I don't know. So maybe that wasn't a bright spot after all. I don't know. I like to
Maybe.
laugh with people on the internet. I think that's fun. Even with like some of the drama that happens on Twitter, just like doing a funny drawing. I don't know. I drew that picture of Minya going to summer camp as like an alternative to some other convention you could go to. Like, oh, let's all brainstorm together. Let's go to Kaiju camp. So I drew that picture of Minya. And then his name's Keith. He's another artist that I follow. He did that hilarious like Shin Minya thing a couple of weeks ago, but then he did it as
terrifying.
He did it as Shin Minya going to camp, like crying blood. It was the funniest thing. I'm so glad he did it.
I love your sense of humor. I do.
Thanks. I'm glad. I try to cheer people up too, and not have it just be doom and gloom. Because sometimes I don't know. Yeah. Even like in a crusade to do something good, I think that can end up being really like, I don't know, deflating. Like, yeah, we want something good to come out of it, but at what cost? It's like everybody just feels kind of grumpy and down on themselves. So to make light of it a little bit, but I don't know, maybe there is the potential for some kind of comic convention. I mean, we saw how well Kaiju Conline went this summer. That was so cool. So maybe there's another component they can do with that. I don't know.
For sure. And I really I thought it was such an interesting idea that you proposed yesterday about Kaiju summer camp. I mean, and just beyond the Minya stuff, because that was fantastic. That was definitely S tier right there. But no, it's I think with everything going on this year, you know, we can all agree that 2020 has not been the best. And so everything moving to online, it will change some things going forward. I think now content creators are realizing that you don't have to rent out a huge ballroom or a big facility to provide something to the fan base that we're all going to enjoy. Now, the caveat of that is you don't get that person-to-person interaction, right? But if you're an introvert like you and I, that's perfect. You don't have to interact with real people, and you still get to consume the content. Fantastic.
Right. People don't have to like set their drinks on my table and like bump it as they walk by. Oh my gosh. Some parts of conventions are a pain.
I bet. I wish we had so much more time, because I would love to hear some of the horror stories of conventions.
Have you been able to meet many of the people that you've connected with online over the past couple years, or do you still yet to meet them?
I am still yet to meet them. I am good friends with a lot of them, Travis and Alex and all of them, but I'm yet to meet any of them in person.
Oh man,
honestly. But that really doesn't it's been interesting, because like I'm close to all these people. Like David, I talked to David several times during the week, and you know, he's a good dude. He's one of my favorite people within this community. And it's like I'm not really missing much, I don't believe, except I'm just missing that one-on-one like human interaction. You know, that's kind of hard to replace just like via a phone call or FaceTime or sort of what we're doing. We're just kind of chit-chatting over the internet. And but yeah, I'm yet to meet I'm yet to meet all of these people. And when I finally do get to meet guys like Henry, it'll be interesting. Henry, I know you're going to listen to this episode, man. We love you.
I do have to share this story of when I met Henry at G-Fest 2 years ago.
Do tell.
So good. It was my first time at G-Fest at all, so I was meeting everybody for the first time. And Henry walks over, and he's just like looking at all my stuff, totally silent, but his mouth is hanging open, like I hope he's impressed. And I'm just like, hey, how's it going? And he's just like, hi, I'm really good. I'm Henry, and I love all your stuff. I love everything you do. And I was like, oh, thank you. And then he proceeded to buy like almost everything on my table. And I'm like, what? Like reading off the total to him as I'm like sliding his card through the card reader. And he's just like, yeah, it's fine. So
yeah, that's his thing too. Cause he said that to me before. I was just talking to him the other evening. He said that when he goes to like G-Fest or these conventions, he loves to support, like, I won't say lesser known, but smaller artists, I guess is probably the best way I know how to put it, because, a lot of these artists like yourself, they're very well known, but I don't want to degrade you by saying that you're a smaller artist or anything like that.
No,
I just want to say you're not
that I'm not. I might not be Matt Frank, but I always manage to get my table nearby his so that I can like get everybody who's waiting in line for him to like stop by my table. That's always my
You said it, not me. Yeah. Yeah, it's what he was telling me. Like, there's this long freaking line to go see Matt Frank because he's Matt Frank and all that. And Henry likes to go around and support all these smaller artists that don't necessarily get the same like fan craziness. I don't even know how to describe it. Like the fan,
like the name recognition, right?
Yeah, like. Yeah, he likes to do that, which I think is super cool of him to do. Which, God bless Matt Frank and what he's been able to do. But I'm sort of there with Henry where I do like to support smaller content creators. And because there are some people out there that are doing fantastic work. Destiny Kaiju Hime, she does beautiful work. Obviously you do beautiful work, and and there's other creators and designers and just artists out there that people should know about. And so this is probably a good question to ask you, because I know that you're that you're more in tune with that area of the fandom, even more than I am. Who should people know about in this fandom?
Oh man, there are even tons of people who are like queued up to be a part of the Artist Alley. I wish we had more tables. Well, hopefully maybe with the new venue in the future, we could expand to more than 30 tables. Cause I think about, there's Matt Reedy, who does all of these really cool, lately he's doing these totally symmetrical, like straight on kaiju portraits, and he's just going down the line doing each one of them. Those are really neat. And he was going to be in it this year, and then 2020 happened. So he's great. Yeah, Kaiju Hime is my buddy. I love when we can sit next to each other. Right. I've connected with a lot of people recently. I mentioned Keith, who did the Shin Minya earlier this week. That was hilarious. I think I need to do like a Follow Friday kind of a thing coming up tomorrow. That would be good.
You do.
That's the great thing about the art community is I think we're all so quick to like share each other's stuff. I don't ever feel like anybody's, I don't know, thinking, oh, this is only my art Twitter, like it can only be my stuff. Like, no, people share each other's things left and right. Yeah. They're always connecting me with other people. It's really cool when there are people that I look up to a lot who have been really, I don't know, kind to me and reviewing my work. I love Xander Cannon, who does Kaiju Max, that comic series. Mm-hmm. And he's promoted my webcomic before, which was so cool. I'm just like, I feel like the little guy and you're helping me out. So yeah.
Right. For
Our
sure.
community's nice.
They are. And it, there's a tendency, I feel like, at least there's a reputation for, artists to be very territorial, with sort of with their stuff. But, one thing I have noticed, at least about our little corner of the internet, is everyone is so willing to support and share and just really treat it like an actual community and not like your Twitter feed is your shameless promotion feed and you're not allowed, and you're not going to share anybody else's work because it's my thing. It's mine. So, that's one thing I've been super impressed by people like you and Destiny and some others that I've really noticed that you guys are so willing to just reach out and share and promote other people other than yourself. And I really think that that's what sets the giant monster community and just our little corner of the internet apart from a lot of other places.
Yeah, I agree. It's a friendly place. I like it. And that it doesn't feel competitive. Sure. Like, there are people who are willing to do collaborations too, and I don't know, join the same kinds of art challenges, and I don't ever get the impression of just like, oh, well, you know, you took my idea, or like feeling protective or territorial about, like, I think of being a little kid and watching a movie of being like, okay, well, I'm Gamera and you can be Zigra. No, I want to be Gamera. You know, it's never anything like that. So.
Yeah. Oh boy. That just flashbacks for sure.
I volunteer to always be Zigra. This is the part of any podcast that I'm on where I have to shame David and be like, David, you made a mistake. You need to watch Zigra again and you will like it. It's a good movie.
Why? But why Zigra? Like, I don't understand.
He's like a cool shark and he's one of the only ones that talks. He's like super evil and condescending. Like, I don't know. It's cool.
Oh man. That's hilarious. Like the mental pictures I'm getting right now are horrifying. But Lisa, this has been such a pleasant conversation. Thank you so much. And I know we've only got just a few more minutes together, but if you don't mind, what's next for you? What's coming up for you as an artist, for you as a person, just whatever you want to share. What's coming up in the rest of the year, heading into 2021?
Yeah. Finished up a good comic contract. So I've got more of my own time on my hands. So I'm going to dedicate more of my time to my webcomics. So I think I can speed up my page rate a little bit. Maybe I could do more than one update a week, which would be super awesome. Since October is coming up and people were looking for different ideas of drawing challenges, I was really inspired by people who put together the one for Monster March. And I want to do one for October. I'm going to call it Titanatober. So I think I had Titanosaurus on my mind when I did it. But yeah, I've got like a mix of monsters from Japanese
he is your favorite
movies.
kaiju.
Oh yeah, Pestar has to be there too. Both Titanosaurus and Pestar are on the list, so everybody has to draw those days. But yeah, I tried to do like an even mix of some Japanese monsters, things from Western movies, or like urban legends, stuff like that. So it should be a fun mix. And I wanted it to be a low pressure thing because I know this is not the year to like try to go out and make it any more harder than it has to be. So I'm hoping if there are some of the entries that look like they'll be fun prompts for people to join in on, that they will, but no pressure to do like all 31. Might be too much stress. So I'm going to be posting again after my hiatus, I guess, other than just the little Minya spam drawings. I did propose that maybe I could do just a Minya summer camp comic or something now that everybody's going to go to Kaiju camp. I think that would be funny, but I don't know if I'll be able to do it.
So that's going to be your next webcomic is Kaiju Camp. I'm already calling it right now. You've heard it here first, folks. The next major project to come out of Lisa Naffziger is going to be Kaiju Camp. Where Minya goes to camp for the first time.
Applications are due Friday.
Oh boy, I'm looking forward to that. Yeah, it's I enjoy all of your theme months that you've put together. I think probably my favorite one so far has been the what was it? What is it? What did you call it? Where you did the kaiju pairings, like the different pairings for.
Yeah, that was another spin-off of Monster March. I just decided to, because I've done it before where I just did individual monsters and there was going to be some overlap of a bunch of ones that I've drawn before. So I was just like, hey, with this kind of list, what ones could be a team to fight together? And people gave some cool combinations. So it was fun to draw them together.
Yeah, it was. I think my favorite one. Well, there was some really traditional ones in there. I think Megalon and Gigan made the list.
That was natural.
Yeah, of course. I think what was it? Orga and the female Muto. I think that was one that was a super interesting pairing. If I'm not making a mistake.
Oh, I'm trying to remember.
Oh yeah, there was a lot, but it was a lot of fun. I don't know who I voted for, honestly. Yeah, I have no idea, but I just know there was a lot of really, really interesting stuff there. So here comes the part of the show that everyone else enjoys, the shameless plug section. So Lisa, give us the rundown on everywhere that people can find you online.
I got my podcast confused for a minute. And I was just like, oh no, I was supposed to come up with a rhyme. I forgot. Like, so as always, half the battle is spelling my last name, but when you can, I'm Lisa Naffziger on Twitter and on Instagram. That's where I do most of my posting. And on Tumblr, my username is Rugops. Everything's linked together. So I think if you find one, you'll find the other. And then I have a Patreon specifically for my webcomic. I just had somebody else join it today as a generous $20 a month patron. So thank you so much.
Okay.
So shout out to that. You can join the Patreon so that you can get like updates early. I post all of my process. So like the way that I'm sketching everything out, inking it, coloring, that's been a good thing too. If I have any errors, people can comment really quick and be like, oh, you forgot to draw like the buttons on somebody's shirt, or they were wearing a hoodie in this panel, but now they're not. So that's been helpful, but I do appreciate the support from Patreon and Twitter probably. Mostly, if you can stand it. Go on Twitter and look for the creepy Minya drawings of Minya going to summer camp, and then you'll find me.
Yeah, you said Instagram, correct? I know
yes.
That's where I followed you. That's where I found you, and your artwork was Instagram.
I'm everywhere, or I try to be. Not on Facebook too much anymore, but that's probably for the best.
I was gonna say that's probably for the best. Like no one hangs out on Facebook anymore except for grandmas. And
you did mention the Facebook groups for Godzilla on there, and I have to laugh at. It's probably better that I don't remember the person's name, but I get a kick out of it every time. This person will just like no context, just post the name of a monster, and then people respond to it. So he'll be like Gigan, and then people are like, no. And that's the only thing of the post. There's like no more content to it. And I laugh every time because they'll be like King Caesar. They'll be like, maybe. Like, I don't know what this means. Like, are we voting on something? But try to picture this like council of people voting on things. And yeah, it's not looking good for King Caesar. So
the moral of the story, giant monster nerds are weird.
It's true.
We're all just really weird people.
Sometimes it's a good kind of weird, but it's pretty weird.
It is. Yeah, it's pretty weird out there. So Lisa, thank you so much for this. This has been a really fun conversation. It's been a pleasure connecting with you because this is the first time you and I have had a chance to talk with each other one-on-one.
Yeah, I'm glad we're friends now. So thank you, magic of the internet.
Exactly. Thank you, internet. And I'm not going to say thank you, COVID, but yeah. If it wasn't for COVID, I probably wouldn't be doing my own show because I wouldn't be stir crazy here at the house and needing to talk to people. But in all seriousness, thank you so much. This has been a real pleasure. I am so happy to know you. I am really happy that you made time out of your busy schedule to sit down and have a conversation with me. And most importantly, audio listener, I hope you enjoyed this conversation. And I want to encourage you to follow Lisa on all the things because she's a fantastic person and her art is wonderful. And all the things that she touches is gold.
Oh, thank you.
That's all I got to say. Right. So until next time, I'm Michael, the Kaiju Groupie, signing off. Thank you for listening to the Kaiju Groupie Podcast, a podcast produced and hosted by Michael Hamilton using redcircle.com. If you enjoyed today's episode and want to continue this conversation, please email me directly at kaijugroupiepod@gmail.com. Also, follow us on social media by joining the Kaiju Groupie Facebook group, on Twitter at Kaiju Groupie Pod, and on Instagram at The Kaiju Groupie. The show is available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you find your favorite giant monster podcasts. Also, please take a moment to rate and review the show. This will help spread the word to other kaiju and tokusatsu fans, and if you do, I promise I'll read your comments on the next episode. All film, audio clips, and graphics belong to their respective copyright holders with no infringement being intended or implied. So until next time, I'm Michael, the Kaiju Groupie, signing off.